Today is the third Sunday of Easter cycle day. We are still in the Easter season, and our focus is still on the risen Christ. Two of Jesus' disciples were leaving Jerusalem very sad and discouraged because their expectation of the Messiah, the Christ, and their hope for the future appeared to have been destroyed by his unjust condemnation and crucifixion. Did evil win the day? What was the most important expectation for them? Was it the liberation of Israel from Roman rule? Sometimes when we think that all is lost, it is because what we expect or wanted did not happen. What if God had an even greater or better plan for us? Be patient and trust God's ability to make something good, even when evil seems to prevail. Some believe that when Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me on the cross?" he was expressing despair. He was actually praying Psalm 22, which starts off, my God, why have you abandoned me?" which expresses despair and mentions a litany of evil that had been befallen the writer before he later encourages the reader to continue to hope in God. I urge you to please read all of Psalm 22, especially in this time of hardship that many are presently undergoing. The disciples were so distressed and distraught that they were unable to think and see clearly. Even though Jesus himself appeared in their midst, they did not recognize him because they did not understand the resurrection, that the dead could come back to life. He may have looked familiar to them, but without acceptance of the resurrection, they could not believe that it was really Jesus. They experienced his presence when their hearts were burning, as he explained the scriptures. At the breaking of the bread, their eyes were open and they recognized Jesus. The whole experience could have been lost if they had not invited him to stay with them. Have you ever invited Jesus to stay with you or to be with you in a crisis? We ought to treat all strangers with dignity and reverence. It was strangers who represented God that granted Abraham's wish for a child with Sarah, his wife, in their old age. Jesus also tells us that when we welcome the stranger with kindness, we welcome him, the Christ. Knowledge of the scriptures help us to recognize the ways of God, which are different from our own and often defies logic. If the disciples had read chapter 53 of the prophet Isaiah, which I urge you to read too, Jesus would not have said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophet spoke. Was it not necessary that Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" come to Mass to celebrate the mysteries of God with hearts and minds open to new insights, that we may experience more fully the presence of Christ among us and to comprehend how much he loves us. Brian P. Mallory, OFM, Franciscan, says this best: we have all traveled the road to Emmaus, and at one time we have had our hopes dashed. But what a difference the presence of Christ makes in our lives. Our eyes are open to a new way of looking at reality by the Word of God. We recognize the real presence of Christ each time we are present at the Eucharist. Christ is not just present, but transforms us, renews us, recreates us, just as he restored hope and joy once again to the disciples on the